Now, not going to beat about the bush this morning. A new bill being put forward by the Albanese government is the most totalitarian, draconian and dangerous piece of legislation and direct threat to your individual rights and freedoms that has ever been put before these Australian people. If it goes ahead, it will be the death of free speech in this nation. Make no mistake about it. It will make certain aspects of life here in Australia little better than life in communist China. It will crush the soul and spirit of this nation more efficiently than if we had handed the keys to Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un and said, "Come on over, boys, make yourselves at home, the beer's in the fridge." It is the supreme irony that hand in hand with claiming that Indigenous Australians need a special voice in order to be heard, this Albanese Labor government is only weeks away from removing the voice of every single Australian, black and white, online. I'm not joking. Last week, the government released this exposure draft of the Communications Legislation Amendment in brackets Combating Misinformation and Disinformation Bill 2023, which they blithely describe as a bill for an act to amend the law relating to communications and for related purposes. It may sound bland, but it is anything but. This bill gives a government body called ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority. You might recognise the name, by the way. It's the same mob, and I'll get back to this in a second, the same bureaucrats who recently found me to be in breach of their code. The bill, in essence, gives this group of bureaucrats the power to unilaterally and arbitrarily determine what is true and what is false online. And if you say anything on any social media platform, be it Twitter or Facebook, Instagram, some blog, podcast, whatever, other than a person-to-person email or text, well, if ACMA deems it to be false and to breach the codes of practice developed by or imposed on digital platform providers, there can be massive civil and criminal penalties, including fines of up to $500,000. In effect, if this bill is passed, you won't be able to post anything online, including blogs, podcasts, whatever, without the risk of it being deemed misinformation or disinformation. ACMA then has the power to issue massive fines to social media companies that fail to adequately crack down on misinformation on their platforms. Welcome to George Orwell's 1984. It is real, and unless we stop it, it is coming into your life and onto your laptop and your mobile phone before you can say Winston Smith or the Ministry for Truth. This new bill claims to be about combating misinformation and disinformation, which on the face of it sounds reasonable. But the problem is, what exactly is misinformation or disinformation? And, more importantly, who decides what is misinformation or disinformation? Well, we know the second bit. ACMA will now decide, and their word is final. So this is ACMA, as you can see. There's their website. There's 6 key figures at the top in purple, and underneath there's a dozen or so other individuals in green with specific tasks. There is a Nerida. She's the boss. There's a Catriona. There's an Anna. There's a Krena. She's the deputy boss. There's an Anita. Oh, and there's a James. Now, I'm sure they're all very well-meaning and professional people. But at the end of the day, they are fallible human beings, like the rest of us. And it's probably not desperately healthy in a democracy for those or any other 6 individuals to have the final say on what is and what isn't the truth. As I say, this same body, ACMA, disagreed with my version of the truth only recently and found me to be in breach of the ACMA code. I won't delve down into the technical details. Andrew Bolt did that very well at the time on his show. But the bottom line was that ACMA upheld 8 of some 80 complaints made against me by Kevin Rudd, some of which related to accuracy of information. So in essence, that means in those instances, ACMA did not accept my presentation or my version or my accuracy in my reporting of what I believe to be the truth. Now, to be clear, the rules governing what I say on telly are not the same as the rules in the new bill, but the bottom line is the same. And that is that from the moment this bill gets passed, digital platforms will be concerned about anything you say online that those individuals at ACMA view as misinformation or disinformation. Here's where it gets even more sinister. The Albanese government has exempted itself from its own bill. So the government can say whatever it wants online and never be accused of spreading misinformation or disinformation. But you can. Which is, of course, precisely what happened during COVID. Individuals were shut down, vilified, hassled, and hounded. They dared make any claims that ran against the government's preferred line, even though it later turned out that plenty of the government's own information was wrong, and certain dissenting voices had been right all along. So what exactly is misinformation and disinformation? The two words front and center of this new bill. Well, according to the draft, misinformation and disinformation are defined as content which, quote, contains information that is false, misleading, or deceptive, or content which is, quote, likely to cause or contribute to serious harm. Okay? And what is, by definition, harm? Well, that makes for very interesting reading in the draft. Harm means any of the following: hatred against a group in Australian society on the basis of ethnicity, nationality, race, gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, or physical or mental disability. Okay, that ticks plenty of boxes, but wait for it. There's 5 other categories of harm, including, yes, harm to the Australian environment. Hooly-dooly. So theoretically, once this bill is passed, you won't be able to say anything on any social media platform in Australia that suggests, for example, that, I don't know, man-made carbon dioxide emissions are not causing global warming, or that the world is not getting hotter, or that coal is a necessary fuel for our prosperity, or that the Great Barrier Reef is healthier than it's ever been, without the risk of it being labelled misinformation or disinformation. Now, I only give those as examples because ACMA have already queried aspects of my own accuracy on matters related to some of those things. So although I'm not saying they automatically would, it is perfectly possible that once this bill is passed, ACMA could decide that claims along those lines are misinformation or disinformation, and there are serious potential penalties.
우리민을 신념의 강자, 가장 존엄 높은 자주도 국민으로 내세워주신 장군님, 이 땅 위에 거창한 창조와 기적의 현실을 펼쳐놓으시고 자신께서는 긴 모래바다를 헤치시며 과연 어디로 가신단 말입니까? 국민의 건강을 천만 년 길이길이 이어드리지 못한 것이 너무나 죄스럽고 너무도 통분하여 피 터진 주먹으로 쾅쾅 가슴을 치고 있는 우리 군대와 인민입니다. 장관님, 들으십니까?
Penalties, including fines of up to $500,000 for digital platforms if you post them online in breach of one of their standards. Especially claims around certain religious viewpoints or views on aspects of the whole transgender industry could also be deemed misinformation or disinformation. Or what about, let's pluck something else just at random. Oh yes, claims to do with The Voice. How convenient that this legislation could actually be in place before the referendum into an Indigenous voice to Parliament. Writing in The Spectator Australia, Liberal Senator Claire Chandler from Tasmania has brilliantly sounded the alarm on this bill. She writes, quote, "In February this year, a carefully coordinated media drop from the Prime Minister's office to the Sydney Morning Herald read, quote, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will link the growing international wave of misinformation to the campaign against the Indigenous voice to Parliament." Yes, saying he's optimistic Australians will look past a confected culture war and support the referendum. Linking misinformation to the no campaign against the voice. Claire Chandler goes on, quote, "Let's not forget that social media companies have been happily censoring and banning those who criticise left-wing ideologies for years. Don't we know it? As Claire says, it's an ominous sign that the Albanese government demands still more censorship and wants to give itself powers to enforce it, including $500 fines." Claire Chandler goes on, quote, "The inevitable result is that social media companies will block content that they know left-wing governments do not like. Albanese's government has cunningly drafted its legislation," says Claire, "to ensure that when your posts are censored or your account is banned as a result of his laws, there will be no right of appeal to the government, and the government will be able to blame the social media platforms." This is so sinister and so disgusting. And don't think that the corporate world will come rushing to help we mere mortals who make them all their profits. BlackRock is one of the world's richest hedge funds. Have a listen carefully to their CEO, Larry Fink.
Uncertainty. Markets don't like uncertainty. Markets like actually totalitarian governments where you have a understanding of what's out there, and obviously we're the whole dimension is changing now with, as you said, a democratization of countries, and democracies are very messy, as we know in the United States. You have opinions changing.
Heaven forbid opinions changing. Ooh, terrible. Big business, we know, prefers, or so he says, totalitarianism. Yes, we now face a situation where a Labor government wants to silence us online. And it is unlikely, even with the exception of Elon Musk at Twitter, that this Labor misinformation bill will meet any resistance from big tech, from big business. So, it's down to us, yet again, you and me and anyone else who believes they should be free to speak truth to power, not truth approved by power. There is still time to try and stop this insidious thing. There's 35 days to stop it. The government website allows for public feedback until August the 6th, and I suggest you give it to them politely and succinctly. As soon as this show is over, all you have to do is go online to this page. If you just Google ACMA Powers Have Your Say, and there's a simple submission form you can fill in. I did mine yesterday. Just explain why you do not want ACMA or any other bureaucratic government body to have the power to tell you what is and what is not the truth online.
We hear about climate scientists, whatever that is. Now, in geology, we have a 250-year track record of arguing about climate. Textbooks are full of it. We've been labouring about climate for a long while, and then there's this sudden new invention of climate science. And I had some of these when I was head of department at the University of Melbourne, and these are embittered, obscure, unemployable academics funded by your taxes, and those taxes are to fund these people's hobbies, and the end result of that is that they put good people out of work and they cost our nation trillions. So there's one group of people that use models, another group of people, I mean, this is really sinful. We use evidence, and the two are not in accord. And if they're not in accord, you've got to throw out the models, which we've seen time and time again are incorrect. So we can look back in the past, and we can see that we've had 6 great ice ages. During that ice age, we'll have the ice expand, that's a glaciation, or it will contract, that's an interglacial. We are currently in an interglacial of an ice age that started on a Thursday 34 million years ago. And the ice has come and gone. In our last interglacial, sea level was about 7 metres higher. Temperature was about 5 degrees warmer. So if someone says, oh, this is the hottest day on record, you have to ask, since when? If it's the hottest day in the last 120,000 years, then that is a record. But since when? So if we go to the peak of our interglacial, which was about 4,000 years ago, it was about 5 degrees warmer. So it's cooler than the hottest temperature on record. If we go to the time of Jesus, when it was warm, it's about 4 degrees cooler than then. If we go to the Dark Ages, go to the Viking Age, we've actually warmed up since then. If we go to the medieval warming, we've cooled down since then. And if we go to the Little Ice Age, we've warmed up since then. So since when? And I know this is going to surprise you, but we've just come out of a Little Ice Age. What do you think temperature's going to do? Fall or rise? It's been rising since the Maunder minimum more than 300 years ago. So it is no surprise that if you have cut-off times for temperature or for sea level or for hurricanes or whatever, you can spin whatever yarn you want to spin. These 6 great ice ages started when we had more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than now. We have 0.04% of that gas in the atmosphere, and we hear words like emissions. Well, that means nothing to me, because the atmosphere has changed in its carbon dioxide content from over 20% to now, which is really low in geological time. If we halved it, all plant life would die, and animals would die.
So to not put this to a vote is to concede defeat. You only win when you run on the field and engage. And let me tell you, my government is engaged. We're all in.
Monuments put front pen to paper turns me into I got this one.